you spray your backyard, enjoy one quiet evening, and then the mosquitoes come right back. Even worse, many treatments don't just affect mosquitoes. They can also harm the bees and butterflies your garden depends on. What if the real solution isn't spraying the insects you can see? Surprisingly, one simple one-cup treatment targets mosquitoes where their life begins, long before they ever start buzzing around your yard, while pollinators continue visiting your flowers as usual. Before we reveal what it is, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more science-backed lawn and garden tips. First, let's uncover why mosquitoes keep returning even after you've treated your yard. You finish mowing the lawn, empty a few obvious puddles, and even spray around the patio before guests arrive. For a day or two, the backyard feels comfortable again. Then, almost without warning, the familiar buzzing returns at sunset. It seems as though the mosquitoes appeared from nowhere, but the next generation was already developing long before the first bite. The story usually begins with water, not flying insects. A female mosquito doesn't need a large pond to start a new generation. A bottle cap filled with rainwater, a forgotten bucket, a clogged gutter, or the saucer beneath a flower pot can hold enough water for eggs to develop. These tiny collections are easy to overlook because they blend into the normal landscape of a yard. Once the eggs hatch, the young mosquitoes remain hidden. Instead of flying through the air, they spend the first stage of life underwater as larvae. They feed on microscopic organic material while coming to the surface for air. During this period, they stay concentrated in one place, unable to travel far from the water where they hatched. A few days later, another transformation takes place. The larvae become pupae, a short resting stage before emerging as adult mosquitoes. When the process is complete, they leave the water, dry their wings, and begin searching for food and places to reproduce. By the time you notice them flying around the yard, the breeding cycle is already finished. This explains why spraying adults often brings only temporary relief. A surface spray may reduce the mosquitoes currently flying through the yard, but it doesn't necessarily affect the eggs, larvae, or pupae developing quietly in nearby water. As those hidden stages mature, a fresh wave of adults quickly replaces the ones that disappeared. Warm weather speeds everything up. Higher temperatures shorten development time, allowing mosquitoes to complete their life cycle much faster than during cooler periods. After a summer rain, dozens of small water-holding spots can become productive breeding sites in less than a week if they remain undisturbed. The challenge isn't the number of mosquitoes you can see. It's the number you can't see yet. Every unnoticed breeding site quietly produces the next generation, making the problem seem endless even when the yard is treated repeatedly. Once you understand that mosquitoes spend much of their lives in water instead of the air, an important question follows. How can a simple one-cup treatment interrupt that hidden stage while leaving bees and butterflies free to continue visiting your flowers? That's what we'll explore next. Picture a rainstorm that lasted only 15 minutes. By the next morning, a forgotten flower pot saucer holds just enough water to cover the bottom. To most people, it looks harmless. To a female mosquito, it looks like the perfect nursery for hundreds of eggs. Within days, that tiny pool can begin producing the insects that will soon be buzzing around your backyard. The one-cup treatment focuses on that hidden stage instead of the adult mosquitoes flying overhead. The active ingredient is mosquito bits, a product containing the naturally occurring soil bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, commonly called BTT. Rather than acting like a broad-spectrum insect spray, BT is designed to target mosquito larvae while they are still developing in water. Its effectiveness comes from mosquito biology. As mosquito larvae feed, they constantly filter tiny particles from the water. When they consume BT, naturally occurring proteins become active inside the larvae's digestive system. Those proteins affect the gut of susceptible mosquito larvae, preventing them from completing their development. Without reaching adulthood, they never become the biting mosquitoes that later fill the yard. Bees and butterflies live very different lives. Adult pollinators gather nectar and pollen from flowers instead of filtering microorganisms from standing water. Butterfly caterpillars feed on plant leaves, while bees collect floral resources to support their colonies. Because their feeding habits and digestive systems differ from mosquito larvae, Bee tide targets mosquito larvae without targeting bees or butterflies when the product is used according to its label directions. Timing is just as important as the ingredient itself. BT works only while mosquitoes are still developing in water. Once they emerge as flying adults, they no longer consume it. That's why treating breeding sites early interrupts the life cycle before the next generation ever takes flight. This also explains why homeowners sometimes see different results. If several hidden breeding sites remain untreated, new adults can continue emerging even though one location has already been controlled. A successful mosquito control program depends on identifying as many water-holding areas as possible rather than relying on a single application. The biggest advantage isn't that mosquitoes disappear overnight. It's that the cycle is interrupted before new adults are produced. Fewer larvae today means fewer biting mosquitoes in the days ahead, reducing the population gradually instead of chasing insects that are already flying. Now that you understand why BT works so differently from traditional sprays, let's walk through a complete backyard inspection and see exactly where the treatment belongs and where it should never be used. The inspection starts after yesterday's rain. At first glance, the backyard looks perfectly normal. The lawn is green, the flower beds are blooming, and nothing suggests a mosquito problem. Yet within a few minutes, several small water sources begin revealing themselves. A bird bath sits beneath a tree. A watering can still holds rainwater, and a flower pot saucer has collected enough water to become a breeding site. Those are the places worth treating first. Instead of broadcasting the product across the lawn, focus only on standing water where mosquito larvae actually develop. Mosquitoes don't spend their early life in grass or on flower petals. They need water, so that's where the treatment belongs. Prepare the 1 cup mixture exactly as directed on the product label. Measure the recommended amount and apply it only to appropriate water-holding areas. Containers that repeatedly collect rainwater, decorative features without fish, rain barrels when permitted by the label, and other stagnant water sources are typical locations. Applying more than directed doesn't improve the results because effectiveness depends on proper placement, not excessive quantity. Leave ponds with fish or other aquatic wildlife alone unless the product label specifically states they're suitable for treatment. Healthy ponds often contain insects, amphibians, and other organisms that contribute to a balanced ecosystem. Using products only where they're intended protects those natural relationships while targeting mosquito larvae in problem areas. The following week tells the real story. The water may look almost identical, but beneath the surface, far fewer larvae continue developing into adults. Since existing flying mosquitoes remain active until the end of their normal lifespan, you may still notice occasional bites for several days. What changes is the number of new mosquitoes emerging from your own yard. Keep checking the property after every significant rainfall. A single storm can create fresh breeding sites in unexpected places. Children's toys, wheelbarrows, tarps with low spots, clogged gutters, and uncovered containers can all collect enough water to restart the mosquito life cycle if they remain unnoticed. Good mosquito control becomes much easier when treatment is paired with simple maintenance. Empty unnecessary standing water whenever possible, refresh bird baths regularly, and correct drainage problems that repeatedly leave puddles around the yard. Preventing breeding sites is always more effective than treating them after mosquitoes have already multiplied. By the end of the week, you're no longer chasing mosquitoes around the patio. You're interrupting the life cycle where it begins, reducing the number of biting adults before they ever have the chance to emerge. Some breeding sites respond extremely well to this approach, while others require a different strategy altogether. Next, we'll compare the most common backyard water sources so you'll know exactly where this method delivers the best results and where it doesn't belong. By now, you've treated the obvious breeding sites and interrupted part of the mosquito life cycle. The next question is whether every source of standing water should be handled the same way. The answer depends on how long the water remains in place and whether mosquitoes have enough time to complete their development there. Some locations become breeding sites surprisingly fast. Flower pot saucers are one of the most common examples. After watering or rainfall, they often hold shallow water for several days, long enough for mosquito eggs to hatch and larvae to begin developing. Treating these containers or simply emptying them regularly can make a noticeable difference in mosquito numbers around patios and garden beds. Bird baths require a different approach. Because the water is intended for birds, frequent water replacement is usually the simplest solution. Fresh water interrupts the mosquito life cycle before larvae have time to mature. When bird baths can't be emptied often enough, always follow the product label carefully to determine whether treatment is appropriate. Rain barrels deserve careful attention. They store water for long periods, creating conditions mosquitoes prefer if left uncovered. A tightly fitted screen prevents adult mosquitoes from reaching the water in the first place, while approved larval treatments can provide additional protection where label directions allow. Temporary puddles behave differently. Water that disappears within a day or two after rainfall rarely remains long enough for mosquito larvae to complete their development. Puddles that persist for a week or longer become much more important because they give immature mosquitoes the time they need to reach adulthood. Decorative water features aren't all alike. Moving water from fountains or circulating pumps makes it difficult for mosquito larvae to thrive. Still ponds without circulation create a much more favorable environment. Understanding that difference helps you focus attention where it's actually needed instead of treating every water feature the same way. Some places shouldn't rely on this method alone. Large natural wetlands, drainage ditches connected to public waterways, or widespread mosquito problems extending beyond your property often require community-wide mosquito management rather than individual backyard treatments. In those situations, addressing only your own breeding sites may reduce local activity without eliminating mosquitoes arriving from nearby areas. The most successful homeowners don't treat every corner of the yard equally. They identify the water sources most likely to produce mosquitoes and concentrate their efforts where they'll interrupt the greatest number of larvae before they ever become biting adults. Finding the right breeding sites is only half the battle. A few everyday habits can quietly recreate those same conditions, allowing mosquitoes to return even after a successful treatment. That's exactly what we'll uncover next. The backyard feels different now. Evenings are more comfortable, fewer mosquitoes hover around the patio, and it finally seems as though the treatment has solved the problem. Yet a month later, the familiar buzzing slowly returns. In many cases, the reason isn't that the treatment stopped working. It's that new breeding sites quietly appeared while everyday routines continued unchanged. Rain is often the first reset button. A single storm can refill containers that were completely dry only days earlier. Children's toys, wheelbarrows, tarps, recycling bins, and even folded patio furniture can collect enough water to support another generation of mosquito larvae. Without a quick inspection after rainfall, the breeding cycle simply begins again. Garden care can create another unexpected invitation. Overwatering flower beds or allowing irrigation to leave standing water in low spots keeps certain areas wet far longer than necessary. Mosquitoes don't need large pools. They only need water that remains long enough for their young to complete development. The edge of the house deserves just as much attention as the lawn. Clawed gutters slowly collect leaves, twigs, and rainwater, creating protected pockets where mosquitoes can reproduce unnoticed. Because these locations sit above eye level, they often remain productive for weeks before anyone realizes they're holding water. Shade influences mosquito activity in a different way. Dense shrubs and overgrown vegetation provide cool, humid resting places for adult mosquitoes during the hottest hours of the day. Even when breeding sites have been reduced, thick vegetation close to patios or walkways can make the yard feel much more active in the evening because adults gather there before searching for a blood meal. Routine inspections make a bigger difference than repeated treatments. Walking through the property for a few minutes after heavy rain often reveals new water sources long before mosquitoes have time to emerge. Removing the water immediately breaks the life cycle without requiring additional products. One overlooked container can undo the progress made elsewhere. A forgotten bucket behind the shed or a tarp holding rainwater may produce enough mosquitoes to make it seem as though the entire yard has become infested again. Finding that single source is often more effective than treating multiple areas that no longer contain larvae. By the end of the season, the healthiest backyards usually have one thing in common. Mosquito breeding opportunities become increasingly difficult to find because standing water is removed before insects can take advantage of it. The treatment helped interrupt one generation, but consistent habits prevented the next one from replacing it. With mosquito numbers finally under control, one final step remains. In the last section, you'll discover how to create a backyard that naturally discourages mosquitoes while continuing to welcome bees, butterflies, and other beneficial wildlife. The mosquitoes are finally becoming harder to notice. Evenings feel more comfortable. Family dinners stay outdoors a little longer, and the constant buzzing has started to fade. Reaching this point is satisfying, but lasting success depends on what happens after the mosquito population drops. The next goal isn't simply controlling today's insects, it's making your yard far less welcoming to future generations. Start by making standing water difficult to find. After every rainfall, spend a few minutes walking around the property. Empty containers that collected water, straighten tarps that formed low pockets, and check anything that can quietly trap rain. Small actions performed regularly prevent hundreds of mosquito larvae from ever reaching adulthood. Healthy landscaping helps in another way. Trim shrubs that have become dense and overgrown, especially around patios, decks, and walkways. Better airflow allows these areas to dry more quickly and removes the cool, shaded resting places adult mosquitoes prefer during the hottest part of the day. Your pollinator garden deserves a different strategy. Bees and butterflies are valuable visitors that pollinate flowers, vegetables, and many other plants throughout the growing season. Rather than spraying blooming plants with broad-spectrum insecticides, focus mosquito control on their breeding sites instead. That approach reduces mosquito numbers while allowing pollinators to continue feeding where they're needed most. Nature also provides helpful partners. Dragonflies, certain birds, bats, and other wildlife naturally feed on mosquitoes as part of their normal diet. A balanced backyard ecosystem won't eliminate mosquitoes completely, but encouraging these natural predators adds another layer of long-term control without disturbing beneficial insects. Good yard maintenance supports everything else you've already done. Keep gutters flowing freely, improve drainage where puddles repeatedly form, and refresh decorative water features so they don't remain stagnant. These routine habits gradually remove the conditions mosquitoes rely on year after year. Seasonal awareness makes prevention much easier. The first warm weeks of spring and the days following heavy summer rain are the best times to inspect the yard carefully. Finding new breeding sites early requires far less effort than dealing with a large mosquito population later in the season. Now imagine stepping outside next summer. The flowers are still attracting bees, butterflies continue moving from bloom to bloom, and evenings feel noticeably more comfortable because far fewer mosquitoes are emerging from your own property. The one-cup treatment interrupted the mosquito life cycle, but consistent backyard care created the lasting results. That's the real secret, not spraying more, but giving mosquitoes fewer places to begin the next generation. One tiny source of standing water around most homes produces far more mosquitoes than people ever expect. Watch the next video to discover the hidden breeding spot almost everyone overlooks and the simple fix that can dramatically reduce mosquitoes before they ever take flight.